Hello, welcome to another disappointing review. Today we have the Zendo palette by Natasha Denona. This is the third Natasha Denona palette I've tried this month so far. It is the fourth palette I have ever tried from Natasha Denona, and we have another palette where I'm just disappointed. Like, the quality just does not match the amount of money that it costs to buy this, and I'm kind of heartbroken because I asked for this palette as a birthday gift. So I know that the person who bought me this palette most likely spent the full retail price because I had asked for it. And I'm so heartbroken because I really liked the color story in here. I feel like this palette should have been called the Retro Glam palette because there's just something so retro feeling about this palette. And it just it's not translating, y'all. So a palette like this costs, I believe, around $69, which to me, that is a high-end palette. Personally, I would call a palette with this brand and this kind of pricing kind of a luxury palette. Like, most people are not spending around $70 for a makeup palette. That's like a fancy dinner for two, you know what I mean? And this is just the palette. We have this palette, which I'm sure you've seen before in other videos. Do you see how reflective that is? You can kind of see me up there. It's so reflective, so easy to get dirty. I don't know why they picked this kind of cover. Like, that just makes it even fancier, I guess. But you can see my fat fingers just... I'm sure we've all seen videos of this palette by this point. You can even see, like, my fingerprints on the back. But you can also see that these shades you can move around. So this palette I actually did not pre-move the shades around. I actually used... The palette is still as it came in. But both the palette and the packaging super reflective. The nice thing is that this mirror does stand up by itself. I've put a little sticky note on here so you don't see the mirror because it doesn't have any protection on the mirror. It came out without protection on the mirror. But you can see here, this is the layout. This is the original layout. I actually didn't move these shades, but this is what we got on the inside. Once again, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at it now, but just based off like the pinks and the reds and stuff, I would not be surprised if this palette is not vegan, because I'm sure that a palette like this probably has carmine, and yeah, I see some shades in here that have carmine. So this is not a vegan palette, and so shout out to Heather for bringing something like that to my attention, because it seemed important to her, so I'm letting you know this palette specifically from Natasha Denona is not vegan. It has matte eyeshadows, metallic duochrome chroma crystal eyeshadows. I don't know. The payoff on these shades just did not do it for me. They were okay, but there's nothing in here that really screamed to me, hey, this is like a $70 makeup palette. It was just like, okay. And you shouldn't be getting okay for such an expensive freaking palette. I think my favorite shade in here, which you can lay this flat, so that is nice. My favorite shades in here were probably the blue ones, because I feel like they lasted the longest out of all the shades in here. I think my favorite shade in here is actually like this. It's like a cream to matte, I think. It's so soft, and I really liked this shade because it's kind of one of the only shades in here that I was able to deepen up my looks. Ooh, look at that. I really do like this shade. I liked how I was able to play with it and deepen up my looks, but everything else just it's not sparkly enough for me. It's not intense enough for me. It's not even like a cute little subtle, classy, muted look for me. It just feels like the shimmers in particular kind of just fall flat. They just don't really pop. Because I can understand sometimes, like, I'll try palettes, and if a palette's not for me, I'll let y'all know. I'm like, the formula performed well, but, you know, a color like this maybe isn't for me. But I can't imagine wanting to spend this much money just for such a low-grade shimmer. I'm sorry, they're kind of more like satins. But it says on the box, they're metallic duochrome chroma crystal eyeshadows. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm sorry. Like, no. Of the shimmer eyeshadows in here, I think Flow was probably my favorite, because I think Flow gave me the most, like, I don't know, it was just very colorful, it was nice and shiny. I felt like this one, out of all the shimmer shades in here, actually made my eyes kind of pop, but that's kind of it. This Zeal color is the worst. once you placed it on the eye, you could not move it, you could not blend it out. It was so bad. And I have shades like that in other palettes, but I don't recall having a shade like that in other palettes where I paid so much freaking money for this, which, again, this was gifted to me by my then boyfriend. He's my husband now, but this is just, this sucks, dude. Like, it was just so hard to move, and it was so patchy. I don't like that color. And y'all know me, shades like this whole middle row just don't really appear on my skin. They're just not, they're a little too light, and on my eyes they kind of end up disappearing. Ooh, I accidentally went over on that one. Let me try and apply it again. Let me come over here. Accidentally, I think I just applied it on another shade, but it's not showing up, I feel like, as much as it should have, especially like a light pink like that. Let me add more. Can't even really see that one. Yeah, I mean, this one kind of fell on its face. This is another disappointing palette for me. I'm kind of glad that this was gifted to me so I didn't have to spend the money on it, but I really feel awful because I asked for this palette as a gift from my now husband, and I honestly would rather just give it away because I just did not enjoy using this palette. There's nothing about this palette that would make me want to come back to it, just like the Retro Glam palette. The Retro Glam palette at least had those minty shades that I love, but there's nothing in this palette specifically where I'm like, okay, I have to keep it for this one shade, or I have to steal this one shade. I was honestly preparing to pull out shades from the Retro Glam palette to put into here and switch shades out, but at this point I'd rather just give both palettes away. These are really disappointing. Again, I love the color story. I love a color story like this. It got pink oranges and like these greens. I think that's just such an interesting palette, and they're shades that I do like to use. So I was very interested in this. There's definitely something very like 60s about this. I just love it. But the formula is not it, especially for the price and the name brand. So once again, I'm kind of disappointed. I'm passing this along. We just gotta keep it moving because this palette is not for me.